And so I wrote a book in the hopes that kids would ask questions.
Everybody is unique and everybody has worth.
I just want kids to love themselves.
Hello, welcome to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney, and today we have a super special episode with 3 inclusive book authors. Macy Gilson, author of Kindness is Golden, Jessica Parham, author of Great to Be Me, and Megan DeJarnett, author of No Such Thing as Normal. It was a huge honor to be able to talk to each of these lovely ladies, and I will also give an honorary shout out to Dr. Nicole Julia, author of the Able Fables. She was going to be one of the authors included, but because of complications in her pregnancy, she was unable to participate. But be sure to check her books out as well. In this episode, we have 3 mini interviews, and they're each 10 minutes long. In each interview, we chat about the message of their book, their inspiration, and the impact that they hope it has on the world. Now, as parents and professionals in this realm, we know this stuff. We've had the conversations. We care so deeply about inclusion for our children. This episode is for you 100%, but it is also for parents of typical families, in air quotes. We need to bring this conversation outside of our bubble. These conversations and these books, more than anything, need to be in their homes. Please, please, please share this message by sharing this episode. Just a quick share on your social media of choice is great in spreading this to homes all over our communities. So that is one way to get this crucial message of inclusion and kindness out into the world and out of our bubble. There are actually 3 ways to do this. So that was 1. Sharing this episode. And 2 is purchasing the book for gifts for others. And yes, having it in your home library so your children can see themselves in the books is so important and awesome. But beyond that, purchasing them for gifts for others can be so powerful. So give them to your family, give them to your friends. These books were written to raise questions and curiosity in children and help them have those conversations with their parents in the comfort of their own home. So that's a great way to get this message out there and to create a more inclusive world. And idea number 3, which is one of my favorites, is actually to submit a request to your library for them to purchase the book. Let's get these on the shelves at our libraries for parents and kids to grab and check out. And this is one of my favorites because it's a really effective way to spread these powerful messages to countless families. And I will tell you how to do this. I just did this for all 3 books, and I'm super excited, and I hope that our library starts carrying them. So first of all, you can just ask a librarian if you want them to kind of walk you through it. Another way is to hop onto their website for your library, and there is a section to request a purchase, and it might be phrased a little bit differently than that. It is usually under the contact tab. Do request a purchase, and they have a little form on there for you to fill out, and they'll want things like the title of the book and the ISBN. And I will have the ISBNs for each of these 3 books in the show notes so that you can put that in there, because that's something I'm not sure you can get unless you purchase the book. So I'll put that in there so you can request it at your library. I really hope everyone does that because it costs nothing and it's an awesome way to get this message out of our bubble. So like all of you, I care deeply about inclusion and kindness for everyone, but especially for Kimball because he looks different, he is different, and I want that for him. So I have a quick story about that, and then we'll jump into each of the authors. I'm sure you're excited to hear from them. So kind of our first experience with bullying happened when Kimball was about 1.5 years, and that came sooner than I expected. I pictured that happening in elementary school and middle school and things like that, but we were at a Christmas party with some friends. It was really for Wendy and her friends. And Kimball was just sitting on the floor, and these older kids, I think they're probably like 5 or 6, were playing a game with him, but he was the brunt of it. They would take turns touching Kimball. They'd run over and touch him and run away screaming, saying, "The scary baby touched me, and the scary baby's looking at me." And he just kind of looked at them with this innocent curiosity. He had no idea what was happening. And it was so hurtful to watch him being teased. And it was this really scary glimpse into what I know will be a future, because that happens. And it happens even with typical kids. And so there are a few things as painful as picturing what his future might be like with kids doing that, and when he does know what they're doing and what they're talking about. And that is this huge thing that I know we'll need to help him get through. But it really comes down to kindness and inclusion. And so this topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I know it is very near and dear to many of your hearts. And so I'm really excited about this episode to help chat about the importance of love and self-acceptance and acceptance of others and their differences and similarities. And I cannot wait for you to hear from these amazing authors as we chat all about it, because books are everything. Books are where kids learn so many things. So these are such a powerful tool to teach inclusion and to make the world a more loving place for our kids. So first up, we have the lovely Macy Gilson, author of Kindness is Golden. She lives in Fort Worth, Texas, with her husband, Brandon, and their Labrador puppy, Miller. She is a speech-language pathologist, a disability advocate, and of course, author. Macy is a lover of coffee and reading books. Let's dig in. Macy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited to chat about inclusive children's books. I think it's so important and so powerful. I would love to start out with you sharing a bit about your book and the message behind it.
Sure. So as a speech pathologist, I obviously have a passion for language and for literacy, and I always have loved to read, and I always thought someday it would be kind of something that I would be interested in, whether it was writing a book about speech and language or about inclusion. And as I became involved in the disability community, I was asked over and over, how do I raise inclusive kids? How do I talk to my kids about disabilities? And over, I was saying inclusive literature is hands down the best way. And there are several ways, but my personal favorite and something that I've seen be successful with a lot of families is inclusive literature. And if you look for inclusive literature, it is not easy to come by, especially for people that aren't involved in the disability community. So for example, families that want to educate their kids, but they aren't involved in social media advocacy, or they aren't involved in groups in their community or in their churches or whatever it might be. It's hard for them to find inclusive literature. And even now as a published author, I will say with my dying breath, there will never be enough inclusive books. And I think the more the merrier, especially because representation matters, and it matters for kids with disabilities to see themselves in books. And something that I noticed was that not only is it hard to find inclusive literature, and kids with disabilities are underrepresented in children's literature, but they're often misrepresented. And that's almost a bigger problem than not being represented at all. And so that was something that was really important to me with Kindness is Golden, and especially with working with my illustrator, that it was accurate, not just in the language of it, but also in how the disabilities were portrayed. Because I think my biggest fear was that a kid would see somebody that was supposed to represent them and it wouldn't be accurate or it wouldn't be relatable. And I think that's almost worse than not seeing themselves at all. So that was kind of my biggest kind of why I wanted to publish an inclusive book. And that was throughout kind of the theme, like we have to make sure that this is accurate.
So what's an example of that? I was just looking through your book, which I bought for my daughter for Christmas. I'm so excited about it. Just like an example of like, we did this character this way because.
Yeah. So Hattie in the book has Down syndrome. And it was really important to me that Hattie, well, even just any of my characters in general, weren't represented by animals. There was no personification. I wanted it to be a child with characteristics that are commonly attributed to Down syndrome. So we spent a lot of time on her face. There was a lot of subtle things that went into her character. She wears blue and yellow because the colors of Down syndrome awareness are blue and yellow. So there's little things like that I don't think maybe if you didn't know or you weren't involved in specifically the Down syndrome community, you probably wouldn't ever notice. But it's my hope that that will mean a lot to somebody that has a child with Down syndrome. We have a character with cochlear implants.
I saw
We have a
that one.
character in a wheelchair, a character with a limb difference. So all of those things they were really important to me, especially subtle things like, for example, Hattie's wearing blue and yellow or things like that. But especially her facial features. My illustrator's phenomenal, but we went back and forth several times. Like, this has to be perfect.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I noticed that the disabilities that they each have are subtle. And I thought that was interesting because it was almost like not emphasizing their disabilities made it more cohesive, like together, like these are children. And it also highlighted their similarities too with their peers in the classroom, since it's about children in the classroom. I liked that.
Thanks. That means a lot, because I guess the most intentional thing I did was not explicitly say any disabilities or specifically say, this is Nora, she was born with a limb difference. I didn't ever do that in the book because I, as a speech language pathologist, encourage language. And I think that kids asking questions is the best thing that they can do. It's the best way for them to learn. And kids don't ask questions to be mean, and they don't ask questions to be malicious. And so I wrote a book in the hopes that kids would ask questions. And I didn't say explicitly what was going on, because I want a kid to read it and say, hey, mom, like, why does that girl not have a hand? And then that mom has an opportunity to say, well, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. And I feel like if I would have explicitly said she was born with a limb difference, it kind of cuts off a chance for a conversation. And I wrote the book to foster these conversations. So I appreciate you saying that, because that was a really intentional choice to keep it vague, to allow for kind of that curiosity and for kids to do what they do best and ask questions.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. And it was kind of fun to like do a little treasure hunt, like, oh, he has, are those hearing aids? No, those are cochlear implants, or, you know, go through. And I didn't catch the Down syndrome one, and I'm excited to go back and like look at those facial features and stuff, because I think that's awesome.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. That's fun. Somebody else said that too. Like, they kind of looked for like, do I see myself in here? And kind of, it wasn't like you kind of see it right off the bat. And one of the pages that we chose to add was the roll call, like the teacher taking attendance page, to kind of give you like a glimpse, to be able to see everybody, the same classroom, but of all different abilities, and kind of give you like that insight into, here's everybody that you're going to see in the book.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess backing up really quick, for those who are listening to this and have not read the book, how would you describe the plot, or just kind of a general synopsis of it?
Sure. So the book obviously is called Kindness is Golden. The kids are in a first grade class at Golden Elementary. And it is my hope that this class of kids is an example, kind of like the gold standard, play on words, the gold standard for what inclusion should look like in school, that kids of all different abilities should be in the same classroom. They should get to go on field trips together. As somebody that works in public schools, I understand special education and general education and the roles that both of those play. And I think they're both important. But I also think inclusion is really important. And so I wanted all the kids to be in the same class regardless of ability. And so there are half of the characters that don't have what you would see as a disability from the outside looking in. And I think that leaves room to talk about things that are invisible, things like dyslexia, or things that you don't see. But I purposely chose to create a classroom of both kids without and with disabilities. And in this book, they go on a field trip to the aquarium, and one of their friends is in a wheelchair and he cannot get up the stairs to one of the exhibits. And so the kids problem solve and basically say, if our friend can't go, then none of us are going to go. We're going to find something else where everybody can be included and feel valued and respected. And so all the kids, the first graders, problem solve, and they figure out a way to include their friend in the exhibit.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the ending too, when they're looking at the different starfish and they talk about how they're all beautiful, but they're all different too, and how they're all equally important. I think that's an awesome way to drive home the message.
Thank you. Yeah, that was kind of a fun thing, especially for my illustrator, to get to play around with as the kids are looking at starfish from the exhibit. I grew up in Southern California, and so I've seen starfish, and I've seen some starfish with 3 arms, and I've seen some starfish with 5 arms, and I've seen bumpy ones and smooth ones. And so for me, that was kind of an easy way to show, just like the world is more beautiful because of all the different kinds of creatures, or the ocean is more beautiful because of all the different kinds of creatures, the world's the same way. And it's easy for a lot of people to see that beauty in differences in nature and to look fondly at those differences. But for some reason, there's a disconnect between differences in humanity, and they're not looked at with the same beauty and like the same reverence. And the things that we as humans see as the most beautiful are things that are really rare. So things like rainbows or four-leaf clovers, we treasure those things as humanity, and we think that their uniqueness and their rarity makes them more valuable. But when it comes to humans that are unique and that are rare, we don't see that same value. And so that's something that's kind of my lifelong mission, is that there's no difference between humans and nature. And those beauties that we see in nature can so easily be seen and are so evident in humans too.
Yeah, and I love that message because it also expands beyond even disabilities, but also like skin color and race and different kinds of like sexual orientation, or just your basic preferences for what you like to do, or like it includes everyone. So like with my daughter, Wendy, who's, you know, typical, air quotes,
Sure.
she can also benefit from that message too. Like, oh, I'm different too. I also have unique features about me as well as my brother, and we're both beautiful in our differences. And, you know, that adds variety and beauty to the world, like you said. So I just love that.
Yeah, I think one of the, I guess, kind of a revelation in my journey in disability advocacy, for so long, I was talking to parents of kids with disabilities and preaching to the choir, essentially, because parents of kids with disabilities already know what inclusion is. They know what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. They know how to talk to people, friends, family, strangers about inclusion, about disabilities. And so I was sharing this same thing, but I was sharing it to people that already knew and that I was already standing with. And so I had this kind of moment of like, these are not the people I need to be talking to. I need to find a way to talk to parents of kids, again, air quotes, that are neurotypical, because they're the ones that need to hear this message. And part of writing Kindness is Golden and including kids without disabilities was for that reason, for a parent to pick it up and maybe not know right away, hey, this is going to be a message about inclusion and disability awareness. Maybe they just think it's a story about the aquarium. And that was kind of a hope, like pick it up and maybe just randomly stumble upon it. Because again, the disability community are not the people that need to be buying the book. It's people that are not exposed to disabilities.
Right. And I, like, with doing this episode about inclusive literature, I've obviously been looking into it more, and I was like, I need to buy some of these for our gift exchange with our family members, because like the same thought, like we talk about it so much, like on social media and just within the special needs community, of the importance of inclusion. But this conversation does need to be taken outside that community as well to really have a huge impact. And so that is one thing too I would love from this episode, is for us to each go to like our public libraries and to request that these books be added, because that's, you know, that's where they get spread. And people who aren't searching, like, I don't know, they may not even think about inclusive, or they may not even think about inclusion and the need for it. They can have access to it and think of things they haven't thought of before.
Yeah, I've been inspired by a lot of other inclusive authors that have said things like, gift one to your classroom library, your teacher, gift one to your school library, your public library, gift one to a community that you're involved in, or your church, or whatever it might be. And I think that's brilliant, because so often when, especially on social media, when people see, oh, they're a disability advocate, or oh, they write books for inclusion or kids with disabilities, they think like, oh, well, that's not for me because my child doesn't have a disability, or I'm not a parent, or I don't know anybody with disabilities. And if there's one thing that I hope people hear, it's that parents of kids with disabilities are already on board. They don't need to hear this message. And so sometimes I think on social media, especially because every account that I follow is in some way tied in to inclusion and to disability advocacy. And so I see it over and over, and I see so many kind and inclusive people. It's easy to forget that the world is not as inclusive and as aware as my disability bubble on social media. And so sometimes I have to take a step back and realize, even though it seems like I'll scroll through 20 accounts and they're all on the same page as me, there are millions of other accounts that I don't interact with on a daily basis that are not on the same page.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so powerful. I think for people who are listening right now, because a lot of our audience are special needs parents, I invite everyone to share this episode because this would be such a cool way for people to have that perspective and to hear the conversations that we're having in the special needs community and spread awareness about it. And I think that would be just so cool for this to get beyond our circle or our community.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Macy. I loved this conversation. I love hearing your thoughts behind the book and your purpose, and you're amazing. Thank you so much for creating this book.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me be involved and for sharing me with your audience and for sharing them with me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next, we have Jessica Parham, author of Good to Be Me. Jessica is a mom of Harper, who's 5, Nora is 4, and Wells, who is 1.5. They live in Richmond, Virginia with her husband, Andrew, and they've been best friends since they were 10, which I know is totally not related, but I thought that was so cute. This is an interesting one because she is a mom of 3 medically typical children, but she has a passion for raising them to be inclusive, kind humans. Yay, Jessica. Her book is 10% off now through Sunday, and there's a link in the show notes for information on how to purchase that. Jessica is a lover of all things coffee and beach scavenging. Hi, Jessica. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to talk about your book, Good to Be Me. I would love for us to start out with kind of your why behind it and the message of your book.
Awesome. So I have 3 kids. My 2 daughters are 4 and 5, and they're in that weird phase of life where they ask a million questions a day, and they also look nothing alike. So one of my daughters is super tall, brown hair, hazel eyes. One of them is shorter like me, and she's pale skin, blue eyes, glasses, blonde hair. Like, they look nothing alike. So they started asking questions as to why they were different. And so my 4-year-old, the blondie, she's as cute as can be. And she has like a little speech thing. And people started asking her questions as to like, why is your voice so deep? Or she would say things like Merry Christmas, but it comes out as Merry Christmas. I think it's adorable. And so does everybody. But they would repeat it to her and be like, oh, Merry Christmas, Nora. And she started to get super like self-conscious about the way she was saying things. And so she started asking like, why do I have glasses? Why am I shorter? Why don't I look like you? Why do I sound differently? Like all of these things, which led to, why does the friend at church have no arm? And why does this person's skin different than mine? And how come this friend has no hair? And these big questions that I wasn't prepared to answer.
Yeah.
And we love books. So I started searching out different books, and I couldn't find one that I liked enough to buy that didn't explain differences. All the ones I found were like, this is this difference. This is that difference. It never was anything that just showed kids being kids and living life normally with their differences. And so I was like, I'm going to write it because I believe that my kids need to see this. Yeah. And if my kids need to see this, other kids need to see this. And so it just kind of started me on this journey. And I'd always wanted to write children's books. They kind of gave me the push to go in this direction.
Yeah, that is so cool. And I love that, like you said, it doesn't explicitly explain the differences, where it allows the parent to, or the reader to ask the questions or talk about the questions. And I, in thinking about your book and your perspective as a parent of, air quotes, fairly typical children, I think it's so cool because often these inclusive books kind of stay in like the realm of like disability world parenting, when really it's the parents of typical, again, air quotes, typical kids that need to have these conversations, right? Like these are the kids that have the questions and want to talk about it, and I don't know, we shouldn't shush them when they have questions. So I think that's really neat that you have that desire and draw to teach your children about those differences and similarities, really, you know, the things that they have in common with those around them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the grocery store conversation.
Yeah.
Like you go somewhere and it could just be the simplest of things, like a body shape is different than what they're used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And kids very innocently will be like, "Hey mom, look at that person. Why are they X, Y, and Z?" And my kids used to do that and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed." But it's this innocent curiosity. They don't mean anything negative by it. But ever since my kids have gone on this journey with me publishing the book and having it, like, they will look at somebody and be like, "Oh mom, look at her. She is beautiful." Or look at him. He is so handsome. And like,
Wow.
they're like already mentally celebrating the differences that this person has instead of trying to single the difference out. And that has given me so much joy as a mom, just to know that if nothing else, my kids have been able to do some sort of a mental mind shift and see those differences and love it. And we have a sweet neighbor who has Weidman-Snyder syndrome, which is another rare syndrome, and they just found out, and they love him to death. They don't notice anything different. Like he's just our sweet neighbor friend, you know?
Yeah, kids are amazing. I love that too. Their example of just being curious and like, oh, okay. They just want to learn about it. And I love that they were impacted by being with you in this journey. That is so cool. You've seen that difference.
Yeah, for sure. It's been great.
That's amazing. What kind of impact do you hope that this book has?
I just want kids to love themselves. Like truly, this is me, and it may be hard and I may be different, but I love everything about me. Like even something as simple as when I grew up, I have like a more pronounced nose, and it comes from my Lebanese background. And I got teased all of the time, which led to so many insecurities leading up until adulthood. And that's just like one simple facial feature. And it had such an immense impact on me. And as an adult, and I grew up and I matured, like I've realized I don't care. It is a part of me and I love it. But it took me 20 some years to get to that point. And I want kids to be able to see that their shape, their height, their differences are beautiful, and that's what makes them unique and special. And if we were all the same, how boring would that be? And that there's all things that we can learn from each other. And I hope that has an impact of just self-empowerment for kids, where if they do get teased for something, they can kind of just be like, "I don't care. Like, this is me and I love it."
Yeah, totally. And I love how your book kind of gets at that issue from both within and without, because you think about it, the book helps children to feel more confident, like you said, in differences. Like, this is me and I'm really happy that this is the way I am, as well as, and seeing things that are different about others is awesome. So you both create a more inclusive atmosphere for all of our children to grow up in. And then they also are more loving and confident in themselves too. And I just think that's super cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a big goal. So hopefully it comes off that way when you're reading it to your kids.
Yeah, totally. It's happy, it's cute, it's sweet. And I, like you say, it just highlights children playing at the park together. And I think that's just such a relatable way to talk about that.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't know. I feel blessed. If nothing else, this book has taught me and my kids so much about people and differences and loving people.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing a bit about your book and your story and your heart behind it.
Thank you.
Last but certainly not least, we have Megan DeJarnett. Megan is the author of No Such Thing as Normal. Her point of view is so amazing as a mom with disabilities to a son with disabilities. I'm so thrilled to include her. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her husband, Jake, who is a sushi chef, and her two sons, Bronx, who is 7, and Shy, who is 5. Bronx has cerebral palsy and she has spinal muscular atrophy. You can find a code for 10% off this weekend in the show notes. No Such Thing as Normal is read aloud by her sister on YouTube. There's a link for that, so you can check that out as well. Megan is a lover of sushi and home decorating. Hi, Megan. Welcome to the show.
Hey.
I am so excited to chat with you. Obviously, it's been a long time coming, kind of a lot of back and forth, but I have been so bent on having you because of your unique perspective as being a mom with disabilities and having a child with a disability. And your book is amazing. I was reading it to my 4-year-old daughter, and it was kind of after we had some back and forth of like time zone miscommunication, stuff like that. And she was like, "Oh, this is so cool." And I was like, "Yeah, I was going to interview her, but I don't think I will anymore." And she was like, "Oh, that is so sad." And I was like, "Okay, I need to get her on here." So anyway, I'm very excited to chat with you today. And I would love to start out for those who are listening who have not read your book or may not have even heard of it. Please give us kind of a synopsis of your book and its message.
Yeah, definitely. So my book is called No Such Thing as Normal. And really, the whole scene of the book are these two young boys who are going throughout their community and meeting people that are different, whether it's someone that's deaf, someone that has Down syndrome, someone that has autism. And, as a child, they ask sometimes unfiltered questions and they may say things like, well, why aren't they normal?
Mhm.
And really, it comes back to the end of the book that they discover that nobody's normal. There's no such thing. Everyone's unique, everyone's different. And it really actually is a story of my own life.
I loved that reveal at the end. It kind of gave me chills. I was like, oh my gosh, it's Megan. Like, she's the mom. And I just think, I don't know, I love the way that that's written and how the boys don't necessarily think about it until the end. Like, it's an afterthought. Like, wait, mom, what about you? Do people ever say that about you, that you're not normal? And I
Yeah.
just love that.
So I have two sons, and it was my younger son one day basically asked me, he looked at me, and it's like it kind of just clicked one day that something was different. Obviously, they've been around my wheelchair their entire life. It's all they've seen. That's how they know mom. But
Mhm.
one thing just clicked one day, and he looked at me and he said, Mom, why are you and my brother not normal? And I've answered a lot of questions in my life about this, but for my own child, to have these questions, I just knew there's got to be other people who need help answering this because
Mhm.
I was taken back a little bit. Like, how do I appropriately answer this? And so it
Yeah.
kind of started that whole journey. It's really where the book was birthed out of.
Oh, that is so sweet. I love that. And it's so relatable. Like, as a parent, like, oh, yeah, my kid would totally ask, why are you not normal? Like, don't say that. And
Oh, yeah.
after I read this to my daughter, she was like, what does that mean that there's no such thing as normal? Like, but Kimball's not normal. And so we kind of had a little chat about the word typical versus normal. And
Yeah.
I didn't really know exactly how to answer it because we do talk about his differences quite a bit
Yeah.
and we celebrate them sometimes. And other times it's like, oh man, why does he have issues breathing? And so more of a negative way. But like, what would you say? What is the difference to you between the word normal and like typical?
Well, I have to first say, like, a funny thing in my household now, because my kids obviously know the title of my book, is if that word comes out of my mouth, like, they will correct me and be like, Mom, there's no such thing as normal. I'm like, oh, shoot, dang it. Okay.
That's so cute.
And that was kind of funny because it's not that the word in itself is bad,
Yeah, yeah.
and in the back of our book, we give some discussion questions to go over, whether you're a teacher or a parent or someone who just needs help guiding children through these questions. But
Yeah.
there's also another section that is, we call them helpful hints or tips on how to make that interaction a little less awkward or a little less just different and strange. So we
Yeah.
talk about highlighting similarities, instead of only focusing on things that make us different than the person, like, hey, that little girl has shoes that are bright pink just like yours. And it
Yeah.
it brings the human back to, this is what we're actually talking about here. We're talking about the person. Um,
Yes.
and I think,
Yes.
a lot of times I get into this in some other different blogs and podcasts. It's a hard thing for me when it comes to words like typical and special needs, because it's really a preference.
Mm.
Some people don't prefer those terms. And again, it really isn't about the word of normal. It's really about the message behind it, that everybody is unique and everybody has worth. That's
Yes.
really the heart behind what I wanted to share with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just love that. And it's cool because I think it dispels the idea that there's one cookie cutter standard that everyone needs to
Yeah.
be or that everyone is, because it's not true. No one
Right.
is normal.
Yeah, and that was my heart behind it is, I have two sons, and as parents, when if you're listening to this and you're a mom and you have more than one child, you know that you don't ever want one child to feel like they are loved any less or of any less worth. And so
Mhm.
at the moment when my son asked me, why is my brother different or why is my brother not normal? I wanted to bring it back to like, well, you both are amazing young boys. I love you both very much. You're both different. Like, even my
Yeah.
son who doesn't have any medical differences, like he's still different than his classmates. And,
Yeah.
he has his own struggles in school and such. So it's like, I wanted it to be relatable in many aspects of life, not just disability related, but that obviously is a passion of mine due to my situation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting in your book where there are medical complexities or even just the waitress with an accent. Like I
Yeah.
love how you threw that in there because it makes you think like, wow, yeah, we all have unique things about us and that's
Right.
awesome and wonderful.
hmm And I really try to go off my own personal experiences. I can share that even myself, who, I live in an electric wheelchair every day of my
Mhm.
life. My children see it all the time. And I still have to teach my own kids when we're in public and they see someone that's different, what's an appropriate way to talk to them? Like, not staring, not pointing, but like, you have a
Mhm.
question we can ask. Like, I even have to teach my kids that. So I
Yeah.
knew that if I needed a resource like this, other parents needed it too. And that was really my
Yeah.
heart behind it, was like, yes, let's make a resource for parents, for teachers to kind of get through this stage of questions that little kids have, because they're great, but how do we, teach them the appropriate ways to navigate through those questions.
Yeah, and I think it's awesome because as a parent, especially as a parent without disabilities, it's like unless you hear from someone
Yeah.
with that real world experience, it's hard to know if that's really what they want you to be saying or
Yeah.
thinking.
And that is one little piece of advice is I do think everyone's different. Even my own situation is different than someone else with the exact same condition as me. And so it's always
Mhm.
being gracious and asking what they prefer, or is it okay if we
Yeah.
ask you a question? Because some people are super open. Like, I love it when kids ask me questions. Some people are more private. And that's
Yeah.
really okay.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is not to shy away as though we can't ever ask questions, because we're
Mhm.
teaching our children if we're constantly pulling them away or not explaining. And it's also okay to say you don't know as a parent.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's okay, but then you got to educate yourself and you got to come back around to it and teach them.
Yeah.
But it's better to have an educated response than make something up that's totally not true, isn't right
Yeah.
or something, or steers them the wrong way. But it's okay to say
Yeah.
you're not sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I love that. I think that's a good parenting advice all around and especially those days. So one last question, and you kind of have already answered this, but what kind of impact do you hope that your book has?
A lot of people ask me, is this book for, parents of special needs children or people with disabilities, or is this for
Mhm.
everyone? And yes, I do think this book is a great tool for, parents that do have children with different disabilities. But even more so, I actually think it is even more helpful for parents who don't have kids with differences of disabilities or things like that, because
Right.
it is kind of a rare concept for them. And I know a lot of people use my book as a tool of like, I didn't know what to say, so I just gave them a copy of your book. I'm like, okay, cool.
That's awesome.
Because yeah, I do hope that our book is portrayed as it's something that we celebrate. We think differences are to be celebrated. They're a good thing. They make us unique. They make us who we are.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, I love how positive it is. And it really does celebrate all the differences. And it makes you think, well, what's unique about me? And let's think about that and celebrate it. I just love that.
Well, I really believe that if we can teach this concept and this principle at a young age, we can avoid some of the issues that later generations are having of how do we be more inclusive and accepting, and how do we love people for who they are. I really think if we can teach this young, babies, kids, preschoolers, if they can understand everyone's different, everyone's worthy of love and should be included and accepted for who they are, then I just think we'll see different paths in the future of how we handle ourselves around people that are different. So my hope is that every school, every library, every home would have a copy of this, obviously, but I think it's an important message for the world to hear.
Oh, amen to that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for sharing a bit about your book and your mission behind it.
Thank you for having me.
You can find all 3 authors and me on Instagram. You can find Macy at macy.gilson, Megan at No Such Thing Co., and Jessica at Good to Be Me Book. And you can find me at the_rare_life. There are links to each of those in the show notes. That leads me to our giveaway. So this lasts now through Sunday, the end of Sunday, and you just need to hop on Instagram and follow me, and you will see the post explaining how to join the giveaway. It's super easy. It mostly just includes following each of us. So enter that in order to have a chance to win all 3 books and some merchandise. You can either keep those things or give them away to help spread the message. I also have a link in the show notes to a list of tons of inclusive books. So if you want to go peruse those, that list has a lot of options. Join me next week for episode 40, all about the havoc Kimball's birth and diagnoses wreaked on my relationship with his older sister, Wendy. We're talking when the sibling relationship doesn't go as pictured or as planned. It's a good one. Don't miss it. See you then.